The family is the foundational institution of human society. That was God's initial institution in which he created it. And there are some specific things that God has placed within the family that he expects it to do. Number one, this will be very simple. This might be one of the simplest sermons I've ever preached, but I think it's important. Number one, families reveal God's character. As they're supposed to be, families reveal God's character. Let's look here a little bit at chapter 5. Now this is broken up, chapter 5 and 6. I want us to read all of it real quick, of the text that I've given you, because it talks about marriage and then it talks about children and parents, because I want all of us to be covered. It says, wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord, for the husband is head of the wife. This is starting in verse 22. For the husband is the head of the wife, as also Christ is head of the church, and he is the Savior of the body. Therefore, just as the church is subject to Christ, so let the wives be to their own husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her, that he might sanctify and cleanse her with the washing of water by the word, that he might present her to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she should be holy and without blemish. So husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as the Lord does the church. For we are members of his body, of his flesh, and of his bones. For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This is a great mystery, but I speak concerning Christ and the church. Nevertheless, let each one of you in particular so love his own wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. Chapter 6. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment, with a promise that it may be well with you and you may live long on the earth. And you, fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and the admonition of the Lord. What we see Paul doing here is he is addressing all aspects of the family. Husbands, wives, parents, children. He's addressing them all. And when we see this and we understand it in the context of the way God plans it and the way God desires it, we see that families reveal God's character. Now, how do we see that? As you look at the very first beginning of that, in verses 22 and on, he's saying, wives, submit to your husbands. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. There are some specific things there. If we look at the life of Christ, two of the big things that pop out to us about the life of Christ and about who he was on this earth are what? Are love and submission. He submitted to the will of God. And plain and clear, you can't look at the person of Christ without understanding what love is. And so when you look at Christ and you look at who he was and you look at the life that he lived and the person that he was, we see love and we see submission. So when we look at a family, when we look at who that is, we see love and we see submission. It says, wives, submit to your husbands. It says, husbands, love your wives. It would go on to say, children, in essence, submit to your parents. And it would also, in essence, say fathers, and it would mean parents there. You're to train your children, but that would also mean to train them in love. You see love, you see submission, you see all of this throughout the family. You're saying, in essence, what this is saying is you are to be representing the character traits of Christ to your family. It is to be, the character traits of Christ are to be displayed to each other within the family. The gospel is to be lived from husband to wife, from wife to husband, from father to child, from mother to child, from children to parents. The gospel is to be lived. The gospel is to be demonstrated. The gospel is to be represented, to be demonstrated from each member of the family to each member of the family.